All right, today we're going to dive into something that's happening inside you right now. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most fundamental processes in the entire universe. We're talking about cell division. It's the engine that literally powers all life, from the tiniest microbe to, well, you. So let's get into how it all works.
It really all boils down to this one question, which sounds simple but is actually incredibly profound. How do you go from one single cell to the trillions of cells that are sitting here watching this right now? The answer is this amazing, perfectly choreographed dance of copying and dividing. And this isn't just some abstract biology lesson, it's the story of you.
So, here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with the big picture, the idea of the cellular copy machine. Then, we'll zoom way in to look at the genetic blueprint itself. After that, we'll walk through a cell's entire life cycle, watch the main event, mitosis, go down, and then finally, we'll zoom back out to really understand why this whole thing is so important. Okay, let's start with the core idea. I want you to think of your body as this massive, bustling city that's always under construction, always making repairs. So who are the construction workers? Well, those are your cells. And their number one tool, the one they use for everything, it's division. I mean, seriously, right now, as you're listening to my voice, millions upon millions of your cells are duplicating themselves. They're making new skin, maybe healing that paper cut you got yesterday, churning out fresh blood cells. It's this constant, silent, absolutely vital process that really is the very definition of being alive. But a cell can't just split in two. Before it can do anything, it has to make a perfect, flawless copy of its instruction manual, its genetic blueprint. And that brings us into the incredible world of chromosomes. So, what in the world is a chromosome? Well, think of your DNA as a ridiculously long piece of yarn. I mean, miles of it, all crammed into a tiny space. Most of the time, it's just kind of loose and messy. But when a cell gets ready to divide, it does something amazing. It winds that yarn super tightly around these little protein spools called histones, packing it all down into these dense, thread-like structures we can actually see.
And what's wild is just how organized they are. They aren't just random clumps. They have a real structure with these arms and a little pinch point in the middle called a centromere. Remember, in its loose, everyday form, we call this stuff chromatin. It only condenses into these neat little rods for the big show, division. And just a little fun fact, the name chromosome was actually coined way back in 1882. You know, biologists can even classify these chromosomes just by looking at where that centromere is. If it's smack dab in the middle, making the arms equal, it's called metacentric. A little off-center, sub-metacentric, and so on. And this isn't just for looks. That specific structure is absolutely crucial for how they get pulled apart correctly later on. Okay, so we have the blueprint. How does that fit into the actual life story of a cell? Well, that brings us to the cell cycle. And what's interesting is that a cell's life isn't all about dividing. Nope, most of its time is actually spent just getting ready. This whole prep period is called interphase. And it's got three main stages. First up is G1, where the cell bulks up, makes proteins, and gathers all the raw materials it needs. Then comes the most important part, the S phase, for synthesis. This is where the cell painstakingly copies every single piece of its DNA. It's a massive job. And finally, there's G2, a last round of growth and a final systems check to make sure all the machinery is good to go for division. But here's a cool twist. Not every cell is constantly on this cycle. Some cells, like a lot of your neurons or muscle cells, can actually pull off the division highway and enter this resting state called G0 or G0. They just retire from dividing. They do their job day in and day out, sometimes for your entire life, without ever thinking about splitting again. So, after all that meticulous preparation and interphase, the cell is finally ready. It's time for the main event, the moment we've all been waiting for, the actual division, a process we call mitosis. Honestly, the best way to picture mitosis is as a perfectly choreographed relay race. The cell already spent all of interphase making a perfect copy of the baton. That's the DNA. Now in mitosis, its job is to perfectly line up those two batons and hand one off to each of the two new runners, the new daughter cells. Everything has to be perfect. There's no room for error.
And this race has 4 laps, or stages. First, in prophase, that loose DNA yarn condenses into those tight, visible chromosomes. Then, metaphase, they all line up single file right down the middle of the cell. It's so orderly. Next comes the most dramatic moment, anaphase. Zip! The copies are pulled apart, racing to opposite sides of the cell.
And finally, in telophase, new nuclear membranes form around the two complete sets of chromosomes. Job done.
Well, almost. The genetic material is sorted, but there's one last step. The rest of the cell, the cytoplasm, has to split. We call this cytokinesis, and this is where we see a really cool difference between animal and plant cells. Animal cells basically pinch in the middle, like tightening a drawstring on a bag until it splits in two. But plant cells can't do that because of their rigid cell wall, so they build a brand new wall right down the middle called a cell plate. It's like building a partition in the middle of a room to make two new rooms. Okay, wow. We've just gone through this absolutely incredible microscopic journey. We've seen the how. So now, let's zoom all the way back out and tackle the big question. Why does any of this matter so much?
The importance here is just staggering. I mean, mitosis is how you grew from a single fertilized egg into the complex person you are today. For tons of simpler organisms, it's how they reproduce, period. And for us, it's our body's essential repair crew, constantly healing us, replacing worn-out cells, and basically just keeping our whole operation running smoothly.
But the story of life isn't just about making new cells. To keep an organism healthy and balanced, there has to be a way to get rid of cells too. And it turns out that cell death isn't always an accident. A lot of the time, it's a programmed, essential part of the plan. And there are two main ways this can happen. On one hand, you have necrosis. Think of this as accidental death. The cell gets damaged by an injury, a toxin, an infection, and it dies messily. But then there's apoptosis. This is totally different. This is programmed cell death. It's a clean, controlled cellular suicide for the good of the whole organism. A great example? The cells that form the webbing between our fingers and toes in the womb, they undergo apoptosis to give us separate digits. It's a controlled demolition, and it's essential.
And that leaves us with one final, really powerful thought. We're beginning to understand this fundamental dance between life and death at the cellular level, this balance of creation and programmed removal. So the ultimate question becomes, as our understanding grows, what are the limits to our ability to guide these processes? What are the responsibilities that come with that knowledge? And what could it all mean for the future of healing, aging, and medicine itself?